This episode is sponsored by Team Mojo, an organization that supports leaders who care about creating engaged and high-performing teams. We provide skills training and coaching in communicating expectations with team members and clients, giving meaningful feedback, delegating, and tracking performance. In short, we facilitate team alignment that creates higher commitment to the organization's purpose. Go to teammojo.ca for more information. Welcome to Suits and Sneakers, a series featuring sage advice and candid conversations with seasoned leaders from diverse backgrounds and styles. I'm your host, Carrie Tuttle. With my guests, we deep dive into areas of team engagement, motivation, and effective performance management. Get ready to be inspired and transform your approach to leadership. Please like, subscribe, or follow to be notified when future episodes are released. Let's get started. Let's dive in. Today, I have with me Neville Chamberlain, who is the founder of Brightworks. He is a former CEO and CTO, and that's how we met. So Neville, maybe you could give a little bit more background on where you came from up to today, and we'll go from there.
Carrie, thank you very much. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. As you said, we met when I was CTO at the same company that we worked for, and that was my background. I studied computer science way back when, in the 80s, when, the good old days. And I spent the first third of my life as a technology nerd. I specialized in writing software. I worked for a company out of the Netherlands that did broadcast TV technology, which was really good fun. And when you and I met, it was my first time that I had come to Canada. And I had been at that company for, I think, maybe a month or two when the board of directors came to me and said, this company needs a turnaround. Would you be interested? And of course, I didn't know what it meant, so I said yes. And in retrospect, I was incredibly fortunate to have a brilliant team who helped me through that transition process. When I left there, the turnaround was a huge success. Not so much thanks to me. I think I had a small role to play. But as I said, brilliant team. And I then went off to England to run a boutique consulting firm, again, back in the broadcast TV industry. And then I guess the third phase of my career was coming back to Canada in 2011 and deciding that I had had enough of the big corporate world, and I went out as a solopreneur. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
Yeah, not only that, but guiding other people to successfully launch their solopreneur businesses. But let's go back to some of the teams that you led. What is one of the most memorable and maybe dysfunctional teams that you were a part of?
Well, the most memorable is easy. There's two. One was the company that you and I worked at. Can I mention the company name?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. So the company was Service Intelligence. And, I think part of the success of what we did there is because I had no preconceived notion of what leaders should do. So I just thought I would do what the right thing is to do. And, it was one of those things where I would point in a direction and all I really needed to do was get out of the way and watch people go where they wanted to go. I knew that I was not the expert in many of the things that people were doing, which I think many leaders don't always understand. You hire smart people to do the work that they know better how to do than you do. And that, I think, contributed to the success because I think people were able to do what they thought was the right thing. And that translated into stellar results. We doubled revenue the first year. We doubled revenue again the year after that. And that's not something that you do easily in any company, especially after you've turned a company around and laid off half the people.
That's right. And that was probably a year before I joined. I was told that I was the first hire after the
That's quite
hiring freeze.
possible.
Yeah. So what was interesting, and I have the benefit, of course, of being there with you, but the interesting thing about the workforce in that company is that a lot of us were cutting our teeth in our careers and really wanted to prove something. So already somewhat highly motivated, but needed some direction. How did you kind of harness the energy and provide direction to the team?
You know, again, in retrospect, it was smart, but I didn't know that it was smart at the time. To me, it was simple. There's when you go through a turnaround, and anytime there's upset in a company, even just tough times, there's a lot of uncertainty, and you want to remove the uncertainty for people so that they know what's important and where you want to go.
Mm.
And one of the things that we started was monthly town hall meetings. And every quarter, we had obviously 3 town hall meetings, one a month, but for every quarter, there was a theme. And I
Mhm.
remember so very clearly after we'd done all of the downsizing stuff that we had to do, the very first quarter's goals were the 3 R's: retain revenue, retain
Mhm.
people, and retain clients, because we were cut to the bone. We couldn't do anything else. And we put very, very simple measures for each of those goals. We put in a presentation, and every month in the town hall, I do a little reveal. Here are the 3 R's. Here's where we were previous month. Here's where we were this month. And I think in the 24 months that we did those exercises, we only missed one of the goals once. So, what happens when you have simple goals, measurable things that people can aim for? Only
Mhm.
3, the whole company chase those 3 goals. It's very easy for people to focus on what's important.
Absolutely.
And
I
I
think
think
that's probably a mistake that a lot of companies or and leaders make is having a big complex scorecard because you want a lot of different things to happen, but it's really just the most important things that need to be measured.
that's a that's a good case in point. I am doing some consulting work for a company where they have quarterly safety meetings.
Okay.
And I look at some of the slides that the top leaders in the company present, and
Hmm.
they have all sorts of measures there, specifically financial measures that most people have no idea what they mean.
Hmm.
You know, what does CAGR mean for someone who's frontline working with clients on a day to day basis? If you're a financial expert, you know what it means. But for the people in the field, no idea. So I think that's one of the challenges that I always see with leaders is you have to be able to engage everyone in the company, and therefore you have to speak in terms that everyone understands. And I'm deliberately avoiding the term dumbing things down, because people are not dumb.
No.
Yeah. So, in fact, what we had to do with service intelligence is we actually, after I sat down with the leadership team and said, these are the things that we need to chase, and we discussed them. We realized that we had to have a bit of a financial education for the whole company. So we
Mm,
actually got the CFO of the company and his team to do a finance 101
that's brilliant.
for everyone, so that everybody understood what compound annual growth rate means, why it's important, what the difference is between gross and net margin. And once people understand that and you start measuring those things, they start chasing those objectives. All you have to do is get out of the way.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and you had those 3 R's. What was identified as things that needed to change to be able to hit those 3 R's?
The teams knew better than I did what we
Mm,
needed to do. I had a very good overview of the whole business, and I could see where all of the different factors were impacting the different bits of the business.
mhm.
Um, I we did something called mystery shopping, or I think the fancy name is anonymous customer evaluation. And when you have people, members of the public, going to a client, a McDonald's or a Krispy Kreme Donuts or something like that, and they have to go and do shops for you, there is so much detail that happens when they go out and try and do the shop that for the leader to try and dictate or even guess at what those people experience, that's really, really tough. And if you try to do that, the people, your team, are going to try and implement those measures, which are very often not the best way to do it. So the answer really is ask the team what's important.
Yeah.
You set the goal and you ask them, what do you need to achieve it?
Right.
And if you give them the resources to achieve it and you give them the freedom to make their own decisions, then I find there's very little holding you back from achieving those goals.
Nice. So when you gave them that financial education, how did you tie the impact of things like gross margin, et cetera, on their own individual performance, and how that linked together?
We went on literally for every role in the business. We explained to them how their role impacts that particular measure. So if you were a customer service representative and we had to deal either with clients or with the shoppers who were doing the shops for us, you had two faces to the world. There were two teams, in fact. And if you are, for example, a simple metric, if you spend too much time with one person on the phone helping them through a difficult shop or trying to clarify some of the data that they recorded, then that affects your ability to speak to other people, which means that we need more people in order to be able to service all of the calls coming in. So we just show people the longer you spend with one client, if you can only spend the whole day with one client and there's 50 people waiting, then we're not providing a very good service. So you have to balance that, of course. You can't cut people short. You have to give them what they need, but you can't go on an extended conversation with them. So people understood the faster I can resolve an issue satisfactorily, that makes a difference to the client and to our cash flow at the end and to our gross and net margin. So the lines, the connections are very, very simple to draw.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So what were the changes that you noticed over the time that you were there in some of the changes that you implemented?
I think one of the downsides of this, I wouldn't call it hands-off leading, but it's leading with why, very much the Simon Sinek kind of approach to things, is that there will be people who try to take advantage of the system. They will try and game the system. And I think the good side of that is that over time, those people tend not to stay at the company for very long, because when you're leading in that particular way, you're instilling a very specific culture. People who don't fit in with that culture, they will naturally, eventually leave the company. Not because they were pushed, but because they feel they're not a good fit for the company. It was very much about team performance and team achievements. So the thing that I noticed over time is that people became very much a team. I think the one story which I've actually used in a blog post is it was a Thursday afternoon around about 3 o'clock or something, and I walked past somebody's desk and they were doing something. I can't remember what, but I said to them, "What are you doing?" And they said, "Oh, I'm just cleaning my desk or something." And I said, "Is your work done?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, go home." And they almost fell off their chair. And like said, "Why?" And I said, "Because you're here to do a job, not to be at work for 8 hours a day." And when you start using and living terms like that, you see a self-reinforcing culture in a company. That is absolutely brilliant to see, because you see people now growing into their own. They're doing things that matter to them. They're doing it the way that matters to them. And people who think that suddenly they can now work 2 hours a day for 4 weeks, they get told by the team very quickly that this is not the way to do things. So that was one of the changes. I think having that kind of culture, driving that kind of culture, the first year, I think that after I assumed the leadership role, I spent maybe 14, 16 hours a day working 6 hours or 6 days a week, which was horrible. And in retrospect, not a good thing. I definitely don't recommend that. But then after that, gradually, it got back to the point where most of what I did was sitting in my office talking to people, and not crisis management either. It was very often it was preemptive stuff. People knew what was going on. They had a handle on everything. So now you're rising above the day-to-day tactical stuff, and you can actually focus on the longer term stuff that matters. So I think those are the two big changes. The cultural side of things, where teams sort of self-regulate themselves, and the other side is where you as a leader can start paying attention to longer term things rather than just what happens over the next week or the next month.
Yeah, I think that was one of your strengths. Like, one of the things I really respected about you as a leader was you challenged us to think about how we used our time. And one of the questions you asked me was about how can you, I think the way you worded it was, how can you do what you do without spending more? How can you do more of what you're doing without spending more time?
Yeah.
And it challenged me to think about, okay, could I take on one more client? Could I take on another project and make it faster, more efficient, more systematic? How could I do that? And I loved
Yeah.
that you challenged me that way. Yeah.
And I think that's the fun part of being a leader, because if you give people permission to perform, you're always pleasantly surprised by the results.
Yeah. Well, and you're a systems guy. So
Too much sometimes, yeah.
no, I don't think so. But so that takes us to the question about what systems leaders can put in place to help them keep the momentum going and stay on top of all of those key indicators.
To me, there's two major principles that drive what and how leaders work. The first one is make it clear why you're doing what you're doing. If people understand why, the rest is easy. The worst thing you can do is tell them that we have to make a profit for the shareholders. Screw the shareholders, honestly, because the people in the company are working there, especially when we had a relatively young team who were early in their careers. They don't give a frig about shareholders, right? Yes, there were shareholders, and if the company did well, then they benefited from that profit. But the purpose of the company was not to make a profit for shareholders. That's the last thing that you should ever tell your employees. The first thing is, why do you do it? And the reason why we did what we did is to help our clients provide better customer service. Yeah, so McDonald's could stay on top of their game, and Starbucks could stay on top of their game. Those were our clients. And we helped them provide a better service to their customers. That's why we do what we do. And who wouldn't love to have the best service in the world when you walk into a retail store? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
Well, I remember working with the Home Depot,
yeah,
and our mission was not just our client. It was like, I think they call it third box thinking, where you're thinking of your client's client. And
yeah.
so thinking about our ability to help do-it-yourselfers
Mm-hmm.
make better projects or make their home a better place to live.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So if you start with why, and you can paint a clear and compelling picture, one of two things are going to happen. People who buy into why you're doing something they're going to be with you. And I know it's not very sexy to say that, yeah, we help companies provide a better service to their clients. You know, we want to save the whales or save the forests or save the trees. Those are more altruistic and sometimes more powerful causes. But, there's a reason why every company in the world exists, or sometimes many reasons. But if you can understand the why, people who buy into it will be there for the long term. People who don't buy into that vision, you have to entice them with salaries and bonuses and barbecues and stuff like that. But that's not something that you can keep upping the ante. It's difficult to do. You actually have to give people a good reason to get up and come to work. So that's the first thing for me. Start with why. If you, as a leader, your primary job is to clarify the why. And that relates to the second part of it, and that is to simplify. Keep things as simple as possible. We had 3 R's. That's the only thing that people had to remember during that first quarter that we had. I can't remember the goals for the other quarters, but they progressed over time. If you use really difficult terminology, or you use terms that people don't necessarily understand or are familiar with, you're going to lose them. So what you have to do is you have to take the why and you have to explain to them in 3 or 4 steps, this is why we're doing this. Our vision of the world is where these problems that people have go away. So in the case of service intelligence, to almost overuse the example, once you understand the why, you have to give people a 3 or 4 step journey that we have to undertake to get to this brave new world where everybody has the best service in the world. Once you've laid out the plan, you say to them, what do you need to get there? So you've set 3 or 4 goals, intermediate goals, if you like, or 3 or 4 metrics that you have to achieve. But if you can keep it as simple as 3 or 4 things and forget about all of the management stuff that they teach you, you're now talking to people in terms they understand that matter to them. If you can explain to them why it's important that they reach this particular goal or try to improve this particular metric, again, you just have to stand back and watch the action happen. So the 2 things for me is always start with why. Explain to people why the company does what it does. People will buy in or eventually go away. Then give them 3 or 4 goals you have to meet, or 3 or 4 metrics that are important. Make sure those metrics are external. They're not things that you measure internally.
So external meaning, can you give an example of that?
It's things that matter to your clients, to the company's clients. So if I measure number of calls per hour that a customer service representative is processing, all that's going to happen is that people are going to try and rush their clients through the phone calls.
Right.
What we're really looking for here is issues resolved, or numbers of issues successfully resolved, or something that measures the success of the company as it pertains to its clients. That's a measure worth having.
Okay.
Internal measures are very often counterproductive because what you measure, people will chase. So if you tell them that you have to work 8 hours a day, I'm paying you by the hour, they're going to be there for 8 hours a day. If you tell them that we need to have our number of outstanding issues at 0 at the end of each day, guess what people are going to do now? That's a very different way of incentivizing people.
How do you stop them from rushing through those resolutions, though? Is there a way that you can maybe add a quality component or some other?
I think yes, you can. And there's, if you're working in very large companies, sometimes that's what you have to do. I think the benefit that smaller companies have is that you can teach people. You can teach them what the correct behavior is, and you can show them what the consequences of not so good behavior is. And the absolutely important thing here is don't blame people for when things go wrong. Things are going to go wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not because people come to work to do a bad job.
Yeah.
There are millions of reasons. And sometimes people are just overstressed. They have problems at home or stuff like that. Sometimes they're not trying to do the job, but 99% of the time they're not there because they want to do a bad job. Everybody wants to do a good job. Recognize that and show them by example that you will never chastise someone for something that went wrong.
Yeah.
I think I only had one rule ever in the business, and that rule was bad news hits me first.
Okay, I love that.
And the reason for that is that I don't want to pick up the phone and hear from one of my members of the board or from a client that the shit hit the fan.
Yeah.
Tell me when it goes wrong so I can have your back. That's why. And if you act that way, if you have your people's back and you say, I'm sorry, we screwed up, we will fix the problem, everybody in your company is going to support you because they can see that you're not trying to apportion blame to people.
Right.
If people are really incompetent, you have to deal with that. But in my experience, that's by far the outlier. That's a very, very small percentage of people. And sometimes you have to let them go. Most of the time, just teach them what a better way is to look at something and to do something. The more, there's an old saying that no battle plan survives contact with the enemy.
Tell me more about that one.
So armies are trained to create battle plans. You craft a battle plan. This is how we're going to go in there. But when you go into battle, the first casualty of that battle is the battle plan because suddenly things are different.
Of course.
Yeah, because now all of the factors that you think you thought of, half of them are gone and replaced by new ones. Yeah, so things are unpredictable. So if you as a battle commander or as a CEO say, here is our battle plan, you will operate according to this recipe, then people will try to follow that recipe. When something goes wrong, like it always does, they don't know what to do. And that's where bad customer service very often happens.
Yeah.
So the solution to that is give them the whole battle plan so that they know exactly what to do when something goes wrong, and then give them permission to do it. Because it doesn't matter how well a strategy you craft at the CXO level, strategy just tells you what needs to be done or where you want to go. It doesn't tell you the day-to-day tactics. The people who are executing the day-to-day tactics, they have to have the knowledge and the power to make decisions on the fly. Tim Ferriss is very famous for saying in his 4-hour work week, he said one of the biggest changes that he made when he was burning out in his first company was to say that any decisions that involve less than $200 to ask anybody's permission. And he said that changed his life because that's 90% of the decisions, the little things that nibble away leaders. So give people permission, whether it's in terms of small money or situations or things, give them permission to do the things that make a difference. Focus on what matters.
Yeah. And then they have the safety that if it does go sideways, it was only $200. It wasn't.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they know you've got their back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Neville, I know you have a really vast international perspective on leadership because you've worked in so many countries. What are some differences that you've noticed across those countries where you've worked in how leaders might motivate staff?
Yeah. So the list, South Africa, England, the Netherlands, most of Europe. I lived in the Netherlands, the States, lived and worked there, and Canada, England twice. I don't There are definitely cultural differences, obviously. And the way that people communicate is quite different. One of the things that's I still try to get used to in North America is when somebody greets you and says, "How are you?" And I think you really want to know, um, because words, like they're asking you, "How are you?" How much
Yeah.
detail do you really want?
Hmm.
In Europe, including England, and Europe, the Dutch and the Germans are much more factually driven by things.
Hmm.
Um, you wouldn't ask something like that. People will look at you askance and say, "Do you really want to know, or is this just false platitudes that you're
Hmm.
giving me here?" So the style of communication is different. When it comes to leadership, I think to me, one of the biggest differences is that when you're working in Europe, by law in the EU, when a company hits a certain size, the board of directors must include at least one member elected by the employees of the company.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So you always have employee representation at the board level.
Hmm.
And that's written into law, into all of the, as far as I know, into all of the EU countries. So that immediately gives you an idea that there is much more concern for employee well-being. In
Mm.
countries like Germany, some companies will even put their mail servers in pause outside of working hours. So, should you choose to send an email on a Sunday, it will not get delivered until 8 a.m. the next Monday morning. So, it
Wow.
forces everybody to have a better quality of life. And those cultural drivers that put a lot more emphasis on employee well being is something that I noticed is quite different here. Um,
What do you think we could learn from European countries and companies about motivating our employees?
I think one of the things that's absolutely striking to me is an interview recently on TV with a founder of an AI company who laid off 90% of his staff because AI is taking over their jobs. And
Hmm.
somebody asked him, "Isn't that a little harsh?" And he said, "Well, yeah, it's harsh if you're a human, but not if you're an AI." And it's that absolute cultural and lack of empathy that just drives me nuts sometimes. I think one of the things that we have to remember is that every single person in a company is there for a reason.
Yeah.
They have a job. You take that reason away, you take that person away, the work still needs to be done. But if you devalue anybody because of their rank in the pecking order or their seniority in the company, that to me is just counterintuitive, because really what's happening here is you're devaluing somebody because of the position in the company and not because they are contributing to its welfare and its
Hmm.
profitability.
Valuing their individual strengths,
Absolutely.
creativity, and
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think leaders need to recognize that everybody is valuable. Everybody has value. Everybody delivers value to the business. And if their position becomes obsolete because of something like AI, then it's
Hmm.
your responsibility as a leader. You have a duty of care to your people. And if you don't take that duty of care seriously, quite honestly, you shouldn't be in that leadership position. You would never work for me if I noticed that.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
with all of that being said, people are the same everywhere. We want more or less the same things.
Hmm.
What is different sometimes are the values portrayed by media. But when you speak to people individually, everybody wants to have a good living, a safe environment, their children to be happy, their children to maybe do better than they do.
Hmm.
And once you understand that, once you realize we're all human, makes a big difference in how you relate to employees.
Yeah. Neville, what advice would you give to your younger self taking on your first leadership role?
Jump further, jump higher.
Ooh, I love that.
Um, I'll tell you a little story. This is a real story. This is back in the mid-90s. I was working for a company out of the Netherlands, and we were doing TV technology integration.
Mm-hmm.
And our parent company, or one of our parent companies, bought a controlling stake in a company in Italy called Telepiù. Telepiù is owned by Silvio Berlusconi, who was the Prime Minister of Italy a few years ago.
Okay.
And we went in, and one of the jobs that we had to do was to revamp their technology systems because Italy was going digital as well. And especially for soccer, or football, as some people know it, that was a big thing because pay-per-view soccer in Italy was just the rage.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted it. Um, I was sitting in a taxi from the airport to the office, having flown in from Amsterdam, and the guy in charge of the Italian operation from our side, he
Mm-hmm.
said to me, "I want you to take this over and run it." And my face went white, my heart dropped into my shoes, and I sat back. I was like a deer in the headlights, and I said, "I can't, sorry." What I didn't realize is that he had seen something in me that made him think I could do it.
Mm-hmm.
And despite all of my fears, I should have grabbed that opportunity and said, "Man, I might fall flat on my face, but if you will give me a guiding hand along the way and keep me out of the holes and pitfalls and stuff that I will inevitably fall into, I would love to." So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes opportunities present themselves, and in retrospect, my life would have been very different. But that's fine. Opportunities come and go, doors open and close. That's absolutely fine. But I think many leaders are so afraid that they are going to fail. I think the advice that I can give is you are going to fail. If you're not failing, you're not trying. And the thing is that experts are the people who've made mistakes more than any other people. You don't become an expert or good at something if you haven't failed at it. So go ahead, grab the opportunity. Don't try and climb over other people. But if an opportunity is presented, or you feel you can do something, or somebody offers you something, go
Mm-hmm.
for it. Don't be afraid. There's lots of help if you ask for it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's
In
maybe
this,
the second part. There's always help. Just
yeah, I
ask.
love. Yeah. And in this day and age, if you reach out, people are so much more accessible than they used to be.
I'm surprised sometimes. I have a friend who used to be a client here in Calgary who started an annual conference. And for his first annual conference, he said, "I want Richard Branson to be the keynote speaker." And I thought, man, you have no idea. There's like 20 layers of gatekeepers between you and Branson, and, $50,000 fee, which goes
Mhm.
directly to charity. He did it. And he showed me how. He just decided, this is what I'm going to do. And he worked his method and he got it. So sometimes you have to set those BHAGs, the big, hairy, audacious goals.
Yes.
Don't be so afraid. And I think maybe a third piece of advice here is don't take too long about it. Do it now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're more capable than you think you are. Don't wait around for the star and the moons and everything to align.
Yeah.
Sometimes you make your own destiny by taking that first step. I think there is a poem that was attributed to Goethe, or a saying rather, that when you decide to move, it seems as if the whole universe moves in concert with you. Suddenly, things will line up, opportunities will appear, information will show up that give you the impetus to move forward. But yeah, be brave, do it.
Absolutely. I love that advice. That's great advice for somebody who's new and starting out and perhaps feeling like, who am I to think that I can achieve something so big? Well, you can.
Those people who've been there 20 years, they still suffer from imposter syndrome sometimes.
That's right. That's right. So, Neville, let's turn it over to you. What are you working on now that you would like our listeners to know about?
Well, Carrie, as you know, I've become a solopreneur by choice. it's just one of those things that I decided I wanted to do. I think by nature I'm a systems guy. I enjoy working on my own. I know that I can lead teams, and I had great fun and great experiences doing that. But yeah, the solopreneur life is fun. So I just this morning, in fact, I put SoloBOSS live. SoloBOSS is the solopreneur business operating system.
It's a great name.
Thank you. I've been using it for about 9 months now to run my business, and I specifically designed it for all of the consultants, coaches, freelancers, creatives, the people who love to work on their own, who don't necessarily want a yacht or an empire. It's sort of an all-in-one solution. So I'm really excited about that potential. I want people to be successful. I had the great fortune of living through the dot-com boom and bust, and we've learned so much about building businesses that people shouldn't have to struggle so much. So I've made it my mission to help, especially solopreneurs, build a successful business faster. And that's what I'm having fun with. That's what my blog is about. That's what all the products and things that I'm developing, that's what that's about. So that's my journey. I'm going to mix in a little bit more international travel into that as well. So I'll become a digital nomad of sorts while I'm doing that, but still continuing to work with the 2 consulting clients that I still have. But otherwise, it's all solopreneur.
Amazing. If somebody's interested in learning more about SoloBOSS, where can they find information? My
website is, the page is now live. So Brightworks, spelled BRITEWRX.com. It's bright and it works. So yeah, Brightworks, and there's a SoloBOSS link at the top of the page. Check it out. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll put the link in the show notes for sure. Neville, I really appreciate you being with us. And I know everyone who watches this is going to really appreciate the advice and the perspective that you brought. So thank you so much for being here.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure talking to you, Carrie.
We're happy you joined us for Suits and Sneakers. If you want to be an expert guest, look for the link in the show notes. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify or YouTube.